Hey guys, welcome back. It's me, Bo, here on the Film Scene Investigation channel. Thanks for checking out this video. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the 1998 vampire drama, The Wisdom of Crocodiles. Now, I came across this movie when I was doing some research into the actress Kerry. Now, she's someone that I've reviewed some of her movies on this channel before. I think she's actually quite an interesting and underrated actress. Anyways, I looked into her filmography, saw The Wisdom of Crocodiles was listed, and given it had a pretty decent cast, I decided to check it out. Just before we get into the review, guys, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. And I just want to say a big thank you to all my current and new subscribers. I love doing this, and you subscribing, liking, sharing, it's a lot of encouragement for me to carry on, so thank you. So, The Wisdom of Crocodiles from 1998, also known in some parts of the world as Immortality, was a movie that was directed by the Chinese filmmaker Po Chi Leong and was based on the novel by Paul Hoffman. Starring a young Jude in the lead role, this movie was shot on location in London in the late 90s and cost around about $5 million to produce. So the movie centered around the character Stephen Grilsch, a well-educated, charming young man who was played by actor Jude Law. At the start of the movie, we saw Stephen's heroics on display when he prevented a young woman from ending her life at Waterloo Station. This woman, called Maria, who was played by actress Kerry, was clearly a troubled individual who had basically had enough of life. She wanted to end it all, and if it wasn't for the quick thinking of Stephen, she would have died, but luckily he prevented her, yet she didn't seem all that thankful. He had just saved her life, but Maria was very ungrateful and just stormed off in anger. What we thought would just be a chance encounter ended up turning into something more when the two eventually met up a few days later and got romantically involved. When we first saw Maria at Waterloo Station, yes, she clearly was a troubled individual and someone that was clearly suffering from some form of depression. But when we saw her again a few days later, she seemed a lot more happier, and it was clear that she was attracted to Stephen. So they got together, but very quickly, Maria realized that Stephen wasn't just your typical average 20-something living in London. In fact, he was quite a unique individual himself. You see, Stephen turned out to be a vampire, a bloodthirsty vampire who preyed on young, vulnerable women in the city of London. This was all revealed when Stephen ended up biting Maria when the two were in bed. What started out as this intimate moment between the two soon turned very bloody, with Maria getting killed in the process. It was definitely a gruesome scene, with Maria almost in a state of shock. She wasn't really fighting back. Her eyes just kind of bulged out, and she was almost like, in total shell shock, as Stephen had a great time sucking all the blood from her neck. I mean, he got her good, and there was no way that she was going to survive. And so, she died, and after Stephen was done, he decided to wrap her body up and drive to the English Channel to dump the body. Just from the way that Stephen acted after he killed Maria, like it was no big deal. Clearly, this guy had done this many, many times before. So, the body was dumped, and in Stephen's eyes, that was the end of that. He had got what he wanted out of Maria, and so he was now free to roam the streets of London for his next victims. But you see, Maria's body was eventually found by the authorities, and, well, so began a murder investigation. A few days later, the news broke that this body had been found at the English Channel and authorities were investigating. Stephen saw this news report and immediately contacted the police to avoid any suspicion. You see, Stephen was smart. He knew that if the police started, looking into Maria's background, then they could potentially connect her to him. So detectives eventually questioned Stephen at his apartment, with Stephen declaring that they were in a relationship, but they had argued and Maria had just suddenly disappeared. The cops, of course, did question why Stephen, Maria's boyfriend, didn't report her missing, with Stephen just saying that they had an argument and he assumed that their relationship was over. This alibi that Stephen had created, in his head, he thought that was enough for him to, be seen as an innocent party in all of this. But Inspector Healy, who was played by actor Timothy Spall, had strong suspicions of Stephen and his version of events. Healy was a very experienced detective who had been working on murder cases for many years. So when he came across Stephen, he knew deep down that he was involved. He just didn't have the evidence yet. Stephen was later brought in to participate in a police lineup, with the detectives saying that it was just part of their preliminary work as part of the investigation. The authorities had successfully identified the vehicle that drove Maria's dead body to the English Channel, and they figured that Stephen definitely had something to do with it. The detectives were trying to apply pressure to Stephen, but he remained cool, calm and collected and participated in the lineup where, unfortunately for the police, he wasn't identified. A witness who had come forward failed to successfully identify Stephen, and so the police were back to square one. As for Inspector Healy, well, he wasn't convinced. He knew deep down Stephen had some sort of involvement in Maria's death and was determined to uncover the truth. Separately, while the murder investigation was ongoing, we saw Stephen get romantically involved with a woman called Anne, who was played by actress Elena Lowenson. She had caught Stephen's eye, and Stephen wasn't shy about making his feelings known. He openly pursued her, and with Anne, well, she liked this mysterious figure that was giving her all this attention, so the two hooked up. They got together, and at first, the honeymoon period, everything was, going fine. But as time went on, Anne got very frustrated with how Stephen was so reluctant to share any of his private life with her. She seemed to want more commitment and honesty in their relationship, whereas Stephen was quite happy to remain this elusive figure. The two had arguments, but they reconciled, and one evening after reconciliation, Stephen couldn't help but attempt to bite Anne just like he had with Maria. It was this intimate moment between the two that soon turned very ugly. You see, Stephen pinned Anne to the bed, and given that he was a male vampire and she was just a mere mortal, there was no way that she could overpower him. It seemed like Anne was a goner. She was about to succumb to this nasty, vicious attack, but at the last moment, Stephen stopped himself. Somehow, some way, Stephen was able to fight back those sadistic urges, that bloodlust that he had, and, well, allowed Anne to live. You had to feel bad for the Anne character, as she had absolutely no idea that she was dating a vampire. And so, eventually, Stephen came clean and revealed his true identity. He told her that he really felt a connection a strong bond between the two, and he really liked her, and he didn't want to hurt her. But ultimately, Stephen was stuck because he was a vampire and he needed to live on fresh blood. Stephen explained the situation in an attempt to try and persuade Anne to let him suck her blood. It was basically this ultimatum in that if Anne didn't help Stephen, then he would die a slow and painful death. Thematically, the Wisdom of Crocodiles explored manipulation within the confines of a relationship. In both cases, Stephen was the dominating force exploiting his partner's affections. You see, both Anne and Maria were dating Stephen under these false pretenses. You see, they felt affection for the man, but in Stephen's eyes, they were just his next victims. I also noticed how Stephen weaponized his own sexuality in order to entice women to date him. You see, Stephen knew that he was a good-looking guy. He was charming, he was funny, he was smart, and he used that to his advantage. I found that quite interesting because in some ways you could kind of describe Stephen as a male femme fatale who, as I said, weaponized his sexuality and took advantage of many vulnerable women. Not that I condone his murderous ways, but you have to remember that ultimately Stephen was a vampire and his main priority was survival, and the way he survived was on new blood, and he was willing to go to whatever lengths to get it. As for the performances in the film, I thought Jude Law was great in the lead role as Stephen Grilsch. This actor, he really was the linchpin that held everything together, delivering this brooding performance of a vampire living in the 20th century. I can't say that I'm a huge fan of Jude Law, but there's no denying that the man can act. He really can. And he proved it here with this film, The Wisdom of Crocodiles. At times, he was very, very captivating on screen and certainly showed a lot of potential as a future leading man. I did think the script was a little off in places, which subsequently hindered Jude Law's performance. But overall, I thought he did a great job with the material that he was given. While Stephen indeed was this bloodsucker, this bloodthirsty vampire, down to the great characterization, Jude Law actually made me feel sympathy for that character. So, props to him, and certainly if you're a Jude Law fan, this is a movie that you need to watch. Fellow British actor Timothy Spall, who played Inspector Healy, was also very good in the role. He certainly looked and sounded the part of this somewhat burnt-out detective who was just trying to uncover the truth behind Maria's murder. As for the actual chemistry between the actors, I thought Jude Law and Timothy Spall, their scenes together, they were the best parts of the movie. The two actors really connected well, and they both had this natural rapport with each other, and it certainly added a level of depth to an otherwise outlandish story. As for actress Alina Lowenson, she played the love interest of Stephen, and I thought she did a pretty okay job. But I'm not going to say that she kind of, delivered this amazing performance or, really was that memorable. Don't get me wrong, she wasn't bad in any way, but there was just nothing really kind of special about her portrayal. It was just kind of there, and the only thing that really kind of I took notice of was that her character, Anne, was at times quite annoying. Towards the end of the movie, the whole murder investigation kind of got put to one side, and a lot of focus was put on the relationship drama between Stephen and Anne. And to be honest with you, I wasn't all that keen. While I wanted to know what was going to happen to Stephen, when it came to the Anne character, I mean, she just seemed very one-dimensional and kind of bland. So, yeah, I didn't really care for the character. Fair play to the actress. She, did her best that she could, but overall it really wasn't anything impressive. One thing I really did like about the film was its whole aesthetic with this dark, elegant vibe. From the fashion to the locations used, it's clear that the Wisdom of Crocodiles was made by some very competent professionals. Stephen's apartment in particular had this very distinctive look with these rustic doors and this grey stone wall. It definitely looked like a very cool and sleek kind of place to live in, and it certainly fit Stephen's character as this vampire who was well educated and highly skilled. I should also mention that there was a really cool shot of Stephen's office floor from this bird's eye view looking down. It was this unique star-shaped design, coloured in browns and blacks, and while not necessarily would I want that for my office floor, it certainly suited Stephen's highbrow nature. And so, dislikes for The Wisdom of Crocodiles from 1998. My biggest dislike for the film would have to be the lack of actress Kerry Fox, because to be quite honest with you guys, she was underutilized. So, as I've mentioned, Kerry Fox, at the beginning of the film, she played Maria, the woman tried to end her life and then was subsequently stopped and had this relationship with Stephen. She would end up being one of his victims, and of course, the murder investigation led on from her disappearance. Now, having seen a handful of Kerry Fox's material, seeing her work and knowing what she's capable of, she really should have been given a much bigger role in this movie. She's a very talented actress, yet she didn't really get a chance to showcase her abilities here. After watching, the whole film, I really believe that Kerry Fox should have actually have been cast as Anne instead of actress Alina Lowenson. I don't want to be too harsh on the actress Alina Lowenson, but I have to just be honest and say that if you had Kerry Fox in that role playing Anne, it probably would have been a better film. Stylistically, it could be argued that Alina was a lot more attractive than the actress Kerry Fox, and so it would seem to me that the filmmakers, went with her over Kerry Fox because, simply she was more visually pleasing. I don't know. It just didn't really make sense to me. The more that I think about it, the more I think it was a missed opportunity. A complete, bad casting decision to pick Lowenson over Fox. But, it is what it is. I also have to ask myself, what really was the point of Kerry Fox taking this role? I mean, she was great, don't get me wrong, but it was such a limited appearance. I don't know. I'm kind of asking myself, was there, a scheduling conflict? Was there, some sort of money issue? It just doesn't make sense to me. And, I'll admit as well, I can be objective and say that I think going into this movie, I assumed that Kerry Fox was going to have a much bigger role. And so I was let down by that. And it certainly hampered my overall viewing experience watching this film. And so, ratings for The Wisdom of Crocodiles from 1998. I'm going to be rating this movie 3.5 out of 10. The Wisdom of Crocodiles was certainly a unique film that attempted to blend different genres together, starting out as a psychological horror and then slowly introducing the melodrama. I actually think that's where this movie went wrong, because they focus too much on the melodrama and the romanticism and all that, where it should have been a lot more cut and dry with this murder investigation and the police trying to uncover the truth. I appreciated the filmmakers for at least attempting to, merge these two genres together. And of course, we've seen that work in the past. But with this entry specifically, I don't know, kind of thought it was kind of bland and kind of safe. Having now seen this movie, I can totally understand how this film has kind of been forgotten over the years. I mean, me personally, other than me, checking Kerry Fox's IMDb, I've never heard of this film before. I've never heard anyone talk about this film before. And yeah, I can kind of see why. Don't get me wrong, this is not a bad film. There are hundreds and hundreds of films that are a lot worse. But it just didn't really, impress me that much. It wasn't really all that enthralling for a 90-minute horror film. The acting was good. It certainly was a well-produced movie. But as the story kind of developed and went further, yeah, I certainly started to lose interest. If you've seen the Wisdom of Crocodiles, then please let me know your thoughts and memories in the comment section below. For all those out there who haven't, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who haven't seen this one yet, it's a minor recommendation from me. I will say specifically, if you're into horror films, but you like your vampire movies, then definitely check this out. But other than that, I can't really encourage you to kind of spend 90 minutes watching this. As I said, it's not bad, but it's not great. It's kind of in between. I mean, it's very mid. So, take of that what you will. And well, that's all from me today, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed this review of The Wisdom of Crocodiles from 1998. I'll be back next week, of course, with another cult movie review. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the content that I do here on the channel. And of course, take care.